I don't want to dance around anymore.
Ow!
Good afternoon, guys. Yes, Grant from Screen Rant here. I am thrilled to chat with you both for incoming. I've actually been a big fan of your work, not just from It's Always Sunny, but also the Mick. I was really bummed when that got canceled, but this movie is such a fun ride from start to finish. It feels like a great throwback to old teenage comedies of yore. What about, or how did this first come about for you guys, this story and, getting to make this your feature directorial debut?
I think we just grew up loving those movies. So we've always been talking about ideas that could fit in one of those. I think whenever we hang out, we're just talking about bits and like, oh, that could be a funny scene for a high school movie. And it's been something we've been kicking around for like 15 years. And when the pandemic hit, we just decided like we're getting further and further away from high school. If we were ever going to write it, now feels like the time.
Yeah, I would also add just like in 2020 when we sat down to write it, the world was somewhat bleak. And we just wanted to write the silliest idea we had in the chamber. And it was this one.
That's amazing. So given your guys' experience, though, as TV, writers and creators, did you ever have an idea of maybe having this be a TV show, or did you always sort of envision this as a film?
Yeah, I think, look, we always wanted to do a high school comedy. And for a while, we were kind of trying to figure out what the through line was. So there was a moment where we were picturing it as a TV show. But I think when we kind of started landing on what the characters and the story were, it just felt like we could wrap it all up in 100 pages. So we went with the movie.
I like it. I mean, and it wraps up pretty well. Obviously, I can't get into spoilers, and I won't, but it wraps up nicely. So you talk about a through line, and obviously Mason Thames, his character, is one of the biggest through lines of this film. He's, fresh off of Black Phone, being incredible on that. But what was it like, searching for the perfect person to play this lead character?
Casting is everything. So I think we put a lot of effort into that. And it was really important to us to find kids that age because we think it makes the stakes seem pretty big. I think once you start sliding in adults to play teenage roles, it just has a compounding effect of like, well, if 20-year-olds are playing the freshmen, then we need 25-year-olds playing the seniors and so on. And Mason was just someone who came in and read, and we really liked him, obviously as an actor, but also as a person. He's such a good guy with a good heart. And so we feel very lucky that we got him on board early on.
I love that. And so I also wanted to talk about Koosh in this movie because much like Stifler, he is someone who there is goodness there, even if he's maybe not going about it the right way. And I'd love to hear not only from the writing, but also, directing Bardia, what it was like, walking that fine line of making sure he's still a character audiences can like while still letting him have a little oddness in him.
Yeah, I think all the credit there goes to Bardia. That was the last character that we cast in this movie. That was a really tricky one. And I think the key with him was you needed to feel underneath it all that there was a good guy beneath there, albeit a little bit misguided. So it was important to us that the audience never felt like Bardia's victim, let's call her, was ever in any real danger, So I think Bardia, just being a sweet guy that he is, despite some of the words and ideas that come out of his mouth, there's just an undertone of innocence to him.
I would also add that, Victoria, who's his scene partner in that whole story, like she's a pretty formidable opponent, and you never think like, oh, this is going to end badly for her. She's just unfortunately stuck with this kid. But I also think that wasn't a challenging thing to edit, but it did go through a lot of iterations, where we do a cut and it would be way too far into something nefarious or into something skeezy, and then you'd pull it back and decide like, well, now it's not as funny and it doesn't seem like as clever. So it was just a real turning of the dials to get that one to a place where you satisfied everything.
Yeah, that was a tricky one too. I would add to that, like, we screened this movie for audiences a few times to just kind of test where it was at. And there were some tests where Bardia would be the highest testing characters. There were some where he'd be the lowest testing character. So I think that's honestly where we'd like to live. Like if everybody likes someone, we probably haven't done our job right, especially with that character. But yeah, again, Bardia did such a good job of finding the right levels and playing with the character and making the adjustments on the fly.
So I'd also love to ask then, because I said Stifler, but then I immediately thought, well, I guess he could be Dennis in a sense too. And I would love to hear, you guys talk about cuts and finding out, the right rhythm and going too far. How much of your time on that show maybe sort of influenced figuring out that versus, just your own experience working together?
A ton, like Always Sunny was a master class for us in likability, amongst other things. But one thing we learned from that show is that there needs to be this unspoken agreement between the audience and the writers that despite some of the trickier situations you put these characters in, us, the creators, it's coming from a good place and our heart's in the right place. And, we're poking fun of the ignorance of that character. And I think audiences are savvy enough to pick up on that.
I also think we're never, you try things out with testing and feedback because the last thing we want to do is turn people off. Like we want as many people as possible to enjoy the stuff we make. So, we're not going to do a joke that alienates everyone just because it makes us laugh. We'll try to toe the line as best we can, but at the end of the day, you want people to enjoy this ride.
Well, I think you guys did a great job with Koosh in particular, because yes, that is one that without that proper feedback and consideration, it could very well have gone wrong.
I'm sure there will be people who have a problem with it.
That's just the nature of comedy anyway, so you'll be okay. So I'd also love to look at Ramon and Raphael. I love their dynamic in this, and I was talking with them before, and they were talking about coming from their Disney days. But what was it like, finding, because those two characters, unlike Kush and or Bardia and Masons, they are very intertwined. So what was it like finding two people that could really play that chemistry with one another?
It was funny because we had our finalists for those two roles, and then we did some chemistry readings on Zoom. And when they both came into the Zoom room together, they both lit up like Ramon, Rafa, like they knew each other. And that was very appealing to us. And then also, I think Ramon in real life is so cool, and Rafa in real life is so sweet. They're so far from those characters. So I think the fact that they got to share so many scenes and play against who their personalities are in real life, I think that just made things very fun, and that shows up on the screen.
Yeah, but I would say their chemistry on that Zoom, before they even started reading the scene, we were pretty sure I think these are our two guys, just watching them interact for a few minutes before we started.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what you want from these characters, but it's also just, it makes for a fun set environment. So I love that. Yes. And one thing that some of the guys brought up yesterday that made me laugh was that sometimes they would go too far with getting the R rating as far as their dialogue. And I would love to hear sort of what that is like. I keep mentioning It's Always Sunny, but that's obviously essentially an R-rated show with adults. But what is it like making an R-rated project with teenagers involved?
At the end of every day, we would march them all to the bathroom and wash their mouths out with soap, just to remind them that this is acting and it's not supposed to be this way. No, I think, that just felt real to us. When we were growing up, our friends swore. And so I think if you try to make a PG high school movie, it just feels inauthentic. And, I do think it's tricky because everyone's parents are on set. So sometimes you finish a take and these kids are being so funny saying the filthiest things. And you look over at their parents and you're like, oh my God. But
we did a lot of apologizing to the parents who were so cool and on set every day. and they were great sports. And I think a lot of it came down to, you know, if you spent any time with these kids, they're such good kids, and that made it easier for us to push them into bad places because we knew that their hearts were in the right place.
Yeah, none of these kids are like walking off set and lighting up cigarettes and like cursing up a storm. Like you say cut and they go back into like being these very, very sweet teenagers. So I think it's fun for them to misbehave and they know what's right and what isn't. So I think that just made it easy for everyone.
But we were we're often telling them that these are not characters to emulate in life. You know, so hopefully the characters who are a little bit more inappropriate and misbehaved in this movie get their comeuppance as they should.
I love that, though. That's a great way to look at that. I see I'm almost out of time, so I did want to ask really quickly. I mentioned the Mick earlier, and I love that we get to see so many returning faces. You got Thomas, you got Scott, you got Caitlin. And did you write those characters with those actors in mind, you know, having worked with them for a couple seasons worth of show?
Absolutely. I mean, Tommy Barbuska, we knew before we even put pen to paper, like he's the guy for that role. And he just makes us laugh so hard. We were actually pretty amazed how far he'd come as an actor. You know, when we first hooked up with him on the Mick, I think he was 12 years old. And he was unbelievably funny and talented, but the professionalism he brought to this set was really cool to watch, you know, because he was usually the guy that struggled to keep a straight face in around Caitlin or Scott or whoever he was sharing a scene with. In this movie, Mason really struggled to not break whenever he was acting opposite Tommy, and Tommy was the consummate professional who always like brought it back and was giving him tips. So it was a joy. Caitlin Olsen, she is our comedic hero. We love her. We'll write for her forever. She's the greatest hang. I think, you know, this was a bit part for her. So we look forward to writing bigger roles for her, but we begged her to do this. And then as for Scotty, just one of our best friends in the world. He's so funny. And again, all those guys brought an energy to the set, and we have a shorthand with them. So I think it really showed the other actors how we like to work, and how true comedic professionals get the job done.
Well, I'm glad you were able to find that space for them because I loved seeing all three of them in this movie as well as everybody else. And I look forward to getting the word out about the movie, guys. It's a lot of fun, and I think people are going to love it. So thank you so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, man, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Grant. This was fun.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
High school's the best, man. Hey, you're in my class, right?
Yo, Mr. Studebaker.
Who's ready for a science lesson?